Out of all the Marvel Disney Plus shows, Hawkeye definitely went by the fastest. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be ranking all 6 Hawkeye episodes from my least favorite to my favorite. I've done this with every other MCU Disney Plus show, so I'm continuing the tradition here. Before I give you guys my ranking of every single episode from Hawkeye, make sure to hit the like button, comment your ranking of the episodes down below, and make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future reviews, rankings, Marvel content, all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and get right into this thing. Coming in last place for me is going to be the first episode of Hawkeye, which I'm actually a pretty big fan of. I think this is one of the better openers for the entire Marvel Disney Plus catalog. What this episode does really well is it sets up Kate Bishop as a lovable protagonist and allows the audience to connect with her right out of the gate. The opening of this episode is phenomenal as it's a callback to the Avengers, the original film in 2012, that shows us Kate's point of view of the Battle of New York, and she sees Clint kicking ass, and in a way, Clint actually becomes her hero, and we see later on she has posters of Clint on her wall. So I think it's very cool that she ends up being with him at the end of the episode, and they have to go on a mission throughout the show, as Clint is essentially Kate's childhood hero. And also, this episode establishes those Christmas vibes right out of the gate, and I really like how at the end of the episode, we see Kate in the Ronin costume, causing all of this drama. We see Lucky introduced. This is just a really great foundation for one of the best MCU Disney Plus shows. Next up for me is going to be episode 2, another really solid episode that actually premiered the same day as episode 1 on Disney Plus. This episode continues to grow Kate and Clint's relationship, and the standout for me is how we see Clint having to LARP or live action roleplay in order to find more information on the Ronin suit. I thought this was hilarious as he's clearly dreading the situation, but he still ends up going and having to do some live action role playing anyway. It's a very funny bit, and they make him try and sell his death scene to get out of the live action roleplay. Very comedic scene. And this episode also shows us more about Jack and Eleanor. Eleanor being Kate's mother, Jack being this stepdad-to-be figure. And it creates a lot of intrigue as to who's really behind the scenes here, who's running the tracksuit mafia, what's really going on. And this episode ends with them getting captured, which I think is a nice little cliffhanger. Next up for me is going to be episode 3 of Hawkeye, which essentially focuses on Echo right out of the gate and gives us one of the better openings in the Disney Plus shows. Like in a 5-minute opening, they were able to set up Echo better than most villains in the other shows. In the opening, we see that Echo's dad is a part of the tracksuit mafia, and that's hints at Kingpin being her uncle figure. We actually find out that Ronin is responsible for the death of Echo's father, which is a gut-wrenching moment that very much reminds me of in Captain America Civil War, when we watch the tape of Bucky killing Tony's parents. It gives me very similar vibes to that when you see a somewhat heroic figure doing something not very heroic. Well, at least in Bucky's case, he's trying to turn around, but when he was brainwashed, he killed Tony's parents. Here, Hawkeye was in a very bad mental state of mind as Ronin during the blip, and so he did some very shady things. Very similar comparison in my opinion. Episode 3 didn't do too much to progress the story of Hawkeye, but I do like the small character moments we got between Kate and Clint, and that's going to be a common theme for every single episode. And I will say that it ended on a cliffhanger that kind of irritated me at the time. It's just Jack putting the Ronin sword up to Clint's neck, so not much happened to progress the story, but we got a little bit more on Echo's background, so that's kind of the main focus of this episode. So next for me is going to be episode 4, which I think is an even bigger step up from episode 3. Again, I have to praise this show because every single week the episodes get better and better. That's the first MCU Disney Plus show that has successfully done that. In this episode, we get an awesome scene between Kate and Clint where they're having a bonding moment. Clint's teaching her a little trick to like flip this little thing across the room. They're having Christmas drinks and snacks and hanging out. But what really hits at the fields is when Kate starts asking Clint questions about what it's like to be Hawkeye and what's the best shot you ever took. And Clint's answer is, the best shot I ever took is the one that I didn't. And he's obviously referring to when he didn't kill Nat. He then dives into his background a little bit more with Natasha and how it's taking him quite a while to move on from it because she was a major impact on his life, a best friend in a way. It's very tragic and heartbreaking. It pulls on the feels, and that's a common theme throughout this entire show. But the standout of this episode is the final fight on the rooftop, where Kate sneaks in to try and get some more information on Echo, and then Echo ends up fighting Kate. And while this is happening, a mysterious figure pops up on the roof, and she's fighting. Her mask is taken off, and it is revealed to be Yelena from Black Widow. This is like the oh shit moment of the show almost, where she finally appears. She ends up fighting Clint. It's a very intense final 5 to 10 minutes that I dug. And the episode ends in a way that sets up the final 2 perfectly, as Clint is like, Kate, you have to go home. This is getting too real. There's a Black Widow assassin after me. So my second favorite episode of Hawkeye is going to be episode 5. This episode has a lot more Yelena and Kate, which is the duo I'm here for that I want to see have their own show down the road. Yelena actually breaks into Kate's apartment, and they have this very long scene, this conversational scene that has a lot of comedy. Yelena's eating some macaroni with some hot sauce. It's it's just a funny moment. And they kind of bond in a weird way while not really at the same time. Kate's trying to kind of tell Yelena, hey, this is the deal with Clint. He's not really as bad as you think. And Yelena's like, just because he's an Avenger doesn't mean he's a good person. So it's a very interesting conversation, one of the better ones in the show. And later on in this episode, we actually see Hawkeye take the Ronin suit, put it on, and go to confront Echo and be like, hey, I'm Ronin, not Kate. I'm responsible for all this madness. And I thought that he might die for a second. Like, he has this conversation with his family where he says, I love you to his wife. So I thought he might be in deep for a second. That wasn't the case. He ends up fighting Echo in a really cool hand-to-hand combat scene, but he ends up getting off scot-free. However, the tension was really high in this episode. But at the very end of this episode, Kate and Clint are sitting together. Kate receives a text from Yelena, and the text says, this is who hired me. It's a picture of Eleanor, so Kate's mom, apparently hired Yelena to kill Clint, but Eleanor is sitting with none other than Kingpin, who is known as the villainous presence from the Daredevil show. So that was another like mic drop moment to end an episode on. Oh my gosh, Kingpin's coming for the finale. This was a really well done episode, and it's almost the best of the show in my opinion. But my favorite episode of Hawkeye has to be episode 6, the finale. It had everything I wanted. It wrapped a bow, see what I did there, on every single character relationship, especially Kate and Clint. As at the beginning of this show, Kate was just kind of an annoying fangirl in a way, and Clint didn't really want anything to do with her. In this one, he admits that they've bonded, and he even has a great line near the end of the episode where he's like, some people in life just make you better. I like the way their arc came full circle, but I think the best scene in this is between Yelena and Clint when they're having a fight, and Yelena's basically winning the fight, has the opportunity to even kill Clint, and then he does the iconic whistle that we know Nat and Yelena have done growing up together, and that's kind of their thing, if you will. And that whistle sets off a whole scene where Clint's talking about how Nat constantly talked about Yelena and how much she loved her, and it really just pulls on the heartstrings. Florence Pugh's acting is so great here. She's breaking down, and you just really buy into it. Like, she lets Clint go, and we don't know when we're going to see Yelena again, but they make amends in a way, and I hope Yelena comes back sooner rather than later, because she's probably my favorite living MCU character, at least one of the top 5. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that Kingpin is in this episode, and they kind of water him down a little bit in my opinion, because in the Daredevil show, he's full-on brutal, just destroying people. And in this, he's a little tamer, he's dressing in a Hawaiian shirt, so he's not as brutal, but he still has a fist fight with Kate where he throws her like a rag doll, and in reality, she would have probably died, but I get it, you have to suspend disbelief a little bit. This man gets hit at full speed with Eleanor's car, gets shot with an exploding arrow, and still survives both of those things. And at the very end of the episode, Echo pulls a gun on him, and the camera pans up, and you just hear the gunshots. He's quote-unquote dead, but we all know he's really alive. It's a classic fake death, in my opinion. And the same goes for Kazi. He's in pretty bad shape. He gets stabbed by Echo, but we never see him die. So both those characters and Echo are probably going to show up in the Echo show. Eleanor also goes to prison in this episode, so there's all that. But I really like how Jack has this nice little moment where he kind of gets to play the hero for a second, and it really subverted all of our expectations of that character, because we all thought he was this villainous presence, but he ended up being a nice guy in the end. What better way to end the episode than with the Barton family chilling at Clint's house with both Kate and Lucky there as well, and they're trying to find a new nickname for Kate, and it ends with the Hawkeye title card flashing on the screen, essentially a passing of the torch from Clint to Kate, as she is now the new Hawkeye. Now, I will say this is a god-awful post-credit scene. It really disgusted me, honestly, because they didn't take the time to set up She-Hulk or Moon Knight or even Echo, the literal show that's about a main character from this show. They kind of just left with a sour taste in my mouth, the post-credit scene, but this is still the most complete episode in my opinion, and probably the best finale of all the MCU Disney Plus shows, as it really just did tie a perfect bow on this 6-episode Christmas series arc. But that's going to do it for my ranking of all 6 Hawkeye episodes. Make sure to drop yours in the comments down below, hit that like button, as well as comment your thoughts on the overall show. Where would you place it next to the other MCU Disney Plus shows? I will have a ranking of all the 2021 MCU projects up tomorrow, so make sure to hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss out on that. Have a ton of Marvel content coming and certain videos out on the channel already, so make sure to check those out if you have not already. And until next time, I'll see you guys later, and happy holidays.